The fork scraped against my plate, cutting through the noise at my brother Ray's table. 30 people crammed into his dining room, all talking over each other about money, success, somebody's new boat. I sat at the far end, away from the glow of the chandelier. Ray wouldn't stop mentioning cost more than my rent. My nephew Marcus elbowed his sister and pointed at my worn jacket. Ray stood up, glass raised high, his voice booming over the chatter. "To George," he said, grinning wide. "The only man I know who can retire broke." Laughter rolled through the room like thunder. My niece covered her mouth, giggling. My sister muttered something about poor planning. I forced my lips into a smile, but my chest felt tight. Ray winked at me like it was all in good fun. I nodded, swallowed the burn, and felt the envelope in my jacket pocket press against my ribs. Nobody knew what was inside. I drove home in silence. The streetlights blurred past my windshield, orange and cold. My apartment was small, quiet, just me and the hum of the refrigerator. I hung my jacket on the chair and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope I'd been carrying for 2 days. The return address read, "Paulson and Associates, Estate Attorneys." My father had been gone 3 months now. I still wasn't used to the silence where his voice used to be. I tore the envelope open slowly, my hand steadier than I expected. The letter was formal, typed on heavy paper. "Mr. Miller, your father's estate has been settled. His final wishes will be read in the presence of all surviving family members 2 weeks from today." I set the letter down and leaned back. 2 weeks. I thought about Ray's toast, the laughter, the way they all looked at me like I was something to pity. I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan turned slow circles above me, casting shadows that moved like ghosts. I thought about the years Ray spent building his construction business, the way he always made sure everyone knew how successful he was. Meanwhile, I worked quietly, saved carefully, and took care of Dad when his health failed. Ray visited twice. I was there every day, cooking meals, refilling prescriptions, listening to stories I'd heard 100 times. When Dad died, Ray showed up in a black suit that probably cost more than my car. He shook hands, accepted condolences, and left before the reception ended. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Ray's wife. Family group chat started. "You've been added." I opened it. They were already joking. Ray had posted a meme about broke retirement. Someone replied with a laughing emoji. I turned my phone face down. 3 days later, the attorney's office called. The receptionist's voice was polite, professional. "Mr. Miller, the senior partner would like to see you privately before the family reading." I agreed without asking why. The office was downtown, glass and steel, the kind of place that made you feel small just walking in. Mr. Paulson was older, gray-haired, with hands that moved like he'd signed 1,000 documents. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Your father left something separate," he said, sliding a sealed envelope toward me. My name was written across it in Dad's shaky handwriting. Inside was a folded property deed and a note on yellow paper. "You'll understand what this land means when the time is right." I looked up. "What is this?" Paulson's expression didn't change. "Don't mention it until the reading. Your father wanted peace, not chaos." I drove to the address on the deed that same afternoon. It took 40 minutes, winding through back roads I hadn't traveled since I was a kid. The land sat near a new highway exit, overgrown with weeds and scrub grass. To anyone else, it looked like nothing. I stepped out of the car, boots crunching on gravel. Across the road, I saw fresh construction, steel beams rising against the sky. Survey markers dotted the field next to mine. A real estate sign caught my eye, "Commercial development coming soon." I walked the perimeter slowly, feeling the wind push against my back. Dad had owned this land for 30 years. I'd never asked why he kept it. Now I was starting to understand. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the sign. Then I called a real estate firm I found online. "I need an appraisal," I said. The appraiser was young, maybe 30, with a tablet and a confident handshake. We met at the property 2 days later. He walked the land, took measurements, checked his tablet repeatedly. I waited by the car, hands in my pockets. When he came back, his expression had changed. "Mr. Miller," he said slowly, "do you know about the highway expansion?" I shook my head. He showed me a zoning map on his screen. Red lines crossed over my property, marking it as prime commercial real estate. "This land," he said, "is worth nearly $4 million." I stared at the screen. The numbers didn't feel real. He kept talking about investors, development potential, market value. I just nodded. When he left, I sat in my car for 20 minutes staring at the empty field. Then I whispered, "Dad, you clever old man." I decided to tell no one, not my sister, not my cousins, not Ray. I let them keep thinking what they wanted. At the grocery store, I used coupons. At church, I wore the same jacket. When Ray called to ask how I was managing, I said, "Getting by." He laughed. "That's the spirit, brother." Every insult, every smirk, every joke in the group chat, I absorbed it all. I didn't defend myself. I didn't correct them. I just waited. The attorney called again. "The reading is in 1 week," he said. "Are you prepared?" I thought about the property, the appraisal, the number that still didn't feel real. "I'm ready," I said. That night I sat by the window with Dad's old photograph. He was younger in the picture, standing beside a tractor, smiling. I remembered something he told me once. "Don't fight small men with big hearts, son. Just wait. They'll shrink on their own." Ray showed up at my apartment unannounced. I heard the knock and knew it was him before I opened the door. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, grinning like we were old friends. "Thought I'd check on you," he said, walking in without waiting for an invitation. He looked around my small living room, his eyes catching on the old furniture, the peeling paint. "You doing okay?" he asked, but his tone said he already knew the answer. I offered him coffee. He waved it off. "Listen, George, I know things are tight. If you need a loan, just say the word. Family helps family." I thanked him but declined. His smile tightened. "You're too proud for your own good," he said, standing to leave. I walked him to the door. "And you're too proud to notice when pride runs out," I said quietly. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. The group chat exploded again. Someone posted a photo from Ray's last barbecue. I wasn't in it. My sister commented, "George couldn't make it. Again." Ray replied, probably working overtime at the retirement home. Laughing emojis filled the thread. I scrolled through it all, my face expressionless. Then I opened my email. The attorney had sent the final notice. "Estate reading this Friday, 10 a.m. All family members must attend." I saved the email and closed my laptop. That Sunday, I went to church. Afterward, there was a lunch in the fellowship hall. Ray was there, of course, holding court at the center table. He saw me and waved me over. "George, come sit." I did. He launched into a story about his latest business deal, how he'd outbid 3 other companies. "Some people," he said, glancing at me, "weren't born to win." I nodded, sipped my water, said nothing. The night before the reading, I couldn't sit still. I paced my apartment, checking the clock every 10 minutes. The property deed sat on my kitchen table next to the attorney's letter. I kept reading Dad's note. "You'll understand what this land means when the time is right." I thought about all the years I'd felt invisible. The missed birthdays, the forgotten celebrations, the moments Ray shone while I stood in the shadows. I thought about the nights I sat with Dad, listening to him breathe through the oxygen mask, holding his hand when he was too weak to talk. Ray had his business. I had those nights. I picked up Dad's photograph again. "Tomorrow," I whispered. "Tomorrow they'll understand." I set the photo down, turned off the lights, and tried to sleep. The clock glowed green in the dark. 2:47 a.m. Tomorrow was already here. The attorney's office felt colder than I remembered. The waiting room was full. Ray sat in the center, legs crossed, checking his phone. My sister was there with her husband. My cousins filled the other chairs. Everyone looked expectant, like they were waiting for good news. I sat near the back, hands folded. Nobody greeted me. Ray glanced over once, nodded, then went back to his phone. At exactly 10, Mr. Paulson appeared. "The family of Theodore Miller," he said. "Please follow me." We filed into a large conference room. A long table stretched down the middle. Ray took the head seat without asking. I sat at the far end. Paulson placed a folder on the table and pressed a button on a small speaker. "Your father recorded his final wishes," he said. "I'll play it now." The room went silent. Then Dad's voice filled the air, scratchy but unmistakable. My throat tightened. "To my children and family," Dad's voice began, "I've thought long about what to leave behind." Ray leaned forward, his expression focused. To my son Raymond, who always loved time, I leave my old wristwatch. Time, my boy, will teach you what pride never could. Ray's face went blank. My sister glanced at him, confused. The recording continued. And to my son George, I leave the Miller Highway property and all its future earnings. Silence. Then Ray laughed, sharp and nervous. That land's worthless, he said, looking around for agreement. Paulson cleared his throat. Actually, Mr. Miller, the property was appraised last month at $3.8 million. The room exploded. Voices overlapped, chairs scraped, someone gasped. I sat perfectly still, watching Ray's face drain of color. My sister stared at me like I was a stranger. Paulson held up a hand. The deed transfers immediately. Nobody spoke to me afterward. They gathered in small groups, whispering, glancing my way. Ray stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. My sister approached first. George, I had no idea. Her voice was sweet now, soft. We should talk about this. Family should stick together. I nodded politely. I'll think about it. My cousin offered to help manage the property. Another relative suggested investment strategies. Everyone suddenly had advice, phone numbers, business proposals. Ray finally walked over. His face was rigid, controlled. You planning to do something smart with that land? He asked. I met his eyes. I'll manage, I said. He laughed once, bitter. Yeah, I'm sure you will. He left without another word. I stayed until the room emptied. Paulson handed me the final documents. Your father knew what he was doing, he said. I believed him. The call started that afternoon. My sister invited me to dinner. My nephew sent a long text about family unity. Ray's wife added me to a new group chat called Miller Family Business Ideas. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I drove back to the property. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. I walked the land slowly, feeling the weight of it beneath my feet. This wasn't just dirt and grass. This was Dad's final message. He'd known what Ray was. He'd known what I'd endured, and he'd waited until the end to set things right. I pulled out my phone and called the development company whose sign I'd seen across the road. I'd like to discuss a partnership, I said. The voice on the other end perked up immediately. We've been waiting for someone to call about that property. When can we meet? I scheduled the meeting for Monday. Then I sat on the ground and watched the sun disappear. Monday came fast. The development company's office was sleek, modern, filled with blueprints and architectural models. The CEO, a woman named Patricia, shook my hand firmly. Mr. Miller, we've been eyeing your land for months. We tried reaching out to your father, but she trailed off. I nodded. He wanted to wait. We spent 2 hours discussing options. They wanted to buy half the property to expand their commercial center. The offer was fair, more than fair. Patricia slid a contract across the table. This secures your future, she said. I read every line, then I signed. For Dad, I whispered. Patricia smiled. He raised you right. As I left, I passed Ray's construction company's building across town. Their lot was empty. No trucks, no workers. I kept driving. That night, Ray called. His voice was different, strained. George, can we talk? I need your help. We met at a diner off the highway. Ray was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth near the back. He looked older, somehow thinner. I slid into the seat across from him. What's going on? I asked. He rubbed his face. The highway expansion, it rerouted. My whole business was built around that project. He laughed bitterly. Investors pulled out. Contracts fell through. I'm drowning, George. I sipped my coffee, waited. I need a loan, he said finally. Just enough to keep things afloat. I'll pay you back. I set my cup down carefully. How much? 50,000, I nodded slowly. I'll help, I said. His face lit up. But I want something in return. His smile faded. What? The old family house, the one you got when Mom passed. Ray stiffened. That's my price, I said calmly. He stared at me, jaw working. Then he pulled out a pen and signed the papers I'd brought without reading them. The house was mine a week later. I drove there on a Saturday morning. It sat at the end of a gravel road, white paint peeling, shutters hanging loose. I remembered running through those rooms as a kid, remembered Dad fixing the porch swing, remembered Ray telling me I couldn't stay there after Mom died because it wasn't practical. I walked through every room slowly. The kitchen still smelled faintly of Mom's cooking. The living room still had the marks on the wall where we measured our heights. I hired a crew to repaint the whole house. I fixed the porch, replaced the swing, planted flowers in the garden. I didn't post about it, I didn't tell anyone, I just worked. One afternoon I saw Ray's truck drive past slowly. He didn't stop. I kept painting. The house came alive again, one brushstroke at a time. When it was finished, I sat on the porch and drank lemonade, watching the sun set through the trees. Months passed. Thanksgiving arrived cold and gray. My sister hosted this year. I almost didn't go, but something pulled me there. When I walked in, the room went quiet, faces turned. Then the politeness started, thick and false. "George, so good to see you. George, you look well. George, we should catch up." Ray stood by the fireplace, hands in his pockets. He didn't raise a glass this time, didn't make jokes, just nodded once when our eyes met. We ate in near silence. My sister tried to fill the gaps with small talk. My nephew asked about the property. I gave short answers. After dinner, Ray and I ended up on the back porch. The cold bit through our jackets. "You did it," he said finally. "Did what? Beat me?" I looked at him. "I wasn't trying to beat you, Ray. I was just trying to survive." He laughed quietly, shook his head. "Dad knew, he always knew." "Yeah," I said, "he did." A month later, another letter arrived. This time it was handwritten, delivered by courier. I recognized Dad's shaky script immediately. My hands trembled as I opened it. "George, if you're reading this, then you know. The land was never about money, it was about patience. You waited when others rushed. You stayed when others left. You cared when it wasn't convenient. I'm proud of you, son. You inherited more than property. You inherited peace. And the patience to wait for truth to arrive. Build something good with it, something that lasts. Love, Dad." I sat at my kitchen table and cried, not from sadness but from relief, from gratitude, from the weight of finally being seen. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the same drawer where I kept his photograph. Then I called Patricia. "I want to donate part of the land," I said, "for a community center." She paused. "That's a beautiful idea. What do you want to call it?" The construction took 6 months. I watched it rise from the ground, steel and brick and glass. I insisted on one thing, a plaque by the entrance. "The Miller Legacy Center for those who build quietly." The opening ceremony was small, just family, a few friends, and the local community. Ray came. He stood at the back, hands in his pockets, watching as I pulled the cloth off the plaque. My sister cried. My nephew shook my hand. Patricia gave a short speech about legacy and patience. When it was my turn, I kept it brief. "My father taught me that wealth isn't about what you show, it's about what you leave behind." I looked at Ray. He looked back. No anger, no jealousy, just understanding. After the ceremony, people filled the center. Kids ran through the halls. Seniors sat in the reading room. It felt alive, purposeful. I stood outside, watching through the windows. Dad's voice echoed in my mind. "Build something good." Ray approached me as the sun set. We stood side by side, looking at the center. "I was wrong," he said. "About a lot of things," I nodded. "We all were." "You could have destroyed me," he said quietly. "You had every reason." "I didn't want to destroy you," I said. "I just wanted to stop disappearing." He looked at me then, really looked. "I made you feel that way." "Yeah, you did." We stood in silence. Then Ray held out his hand. I shook it. "I'm sorry, George." "I know." He left soon after. I stayed until the lights came on inside the center, glowing warm against the darkening sky. People were still there, laughing, talking, building something together. I thought about the family dinner months ago, the laughter at my expense, the assumption that I was nothing. I smiled, not from bitterness, from peace. Life settled into a new rhythm. I sold the rest of the property for enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I kept the house, the one Ray signed over. I spent my mornings there, reading on the porch, drinking coffee, watching the world move at its own pace. Ray's business recovered slowly. He downsized, became quieter, less flashy. We didn't talk often, but when we did, the conversations were real. My sister visited sometimes. We'd sit in the kitchen and talk about Mom, about Dad, about the past. The group chat dissolved. Nobody posted memes anymore. The center thrived. Patricia sent me updates every month, photos of events, stories of lives changed. I visited often, walking the halls, listening to the sound of community. One afternoon, a kid ran up to me. "Are you Mr. Miller?" I nodded. "My grandma says you built this place." "I did." "Why?" I smiled. Because someone taught me that quiet people build the loudest legacies. Christmas came again. This time I hosted. Just a few people, my sister, her husband, Ray, Patricia, and a couple of neighbors. We sat around the table in the old family house. The room smelled like pine and cinnamon. We ate slowly, talked softly, laughed without edges. Ray brought wine, my sister made pie. Patricia told stories about the center's first year. When dinner ended, we moved to the living room. I pulled out Dad's photograph and set it on the mantel. "To Dad," I said, raising my glass. "To Dad," they echoed. We sat by the fire, the warmth spreading through the room. Ray looked at the photo for a long time. "He knew what he was doing," he said. "Yeah," I agreed. "He did." Later, after everyone left, I sat alone by the fire. The house was quiet, peaceful. I thought about the journey from that family dinner to this moment, from humiliation to legacy, from silence to strength. I whispered into the stillness, "Thank you, Dad." The next morning I drove to Dad's grave. Snow covered the ground, soft and white. I brushed the snow off his headstone and sat beside it. "They told everyone I was broke," I said aloud. "Turns out I was just waiting for the right moment, waiting for the truth." The wind moved through the trees. I pulled out the letter he'd written, the one about patience and peace. I read it again, even though I'd memorized every word. "I built something good, Dad, just like you asked." I stayed until the cold became unbearable. Then I stood, touched the stone once more, and walked back to my car. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The cemetery faded behind me, but Dad's words stayed close. "You inherited peace." I smiled. For the first time in years, I believed it. Completely. Now when people ask about my life, I don't explain, I don't defend, I just smile and say, "I'm doing well." The center is full most days. Kids play basketball in the gym. Seniors take art classes. Families gather for meals. Ray visits sometimes. We don't talk about the past much. We just exist together, quieter now, humbler. My sister calls every week. We've rebuilt something fragile but real. The house still stands at the end of the gravel road. I sit on the porch most evenings, watching the sunset, feeling the weight of everything Dad gave me. Not just money, not just land, but the patience to wait for my moment, the strength to stay silent until truth arrived. They called me broke because I didn't brag, but I learned something powerful along the way. Silence has its own kind of power. I didn't inherit money. I inherited peace. And that, I've learned, is worth everything.